It's my pleasure to introduce Mark Walsh, who runs the Dingman Center. He has a company called, is that Genius? What is that? Genius? Rocket. Genius Rocket. Genius Rocket. He has worked for Ted Leonsis. So I guess, Ted, I haven't met you. I know all about you, but I guess he knows what the hell he's doing. Is that the good answer? Okay, okay. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Mark Walsh, who will then introduce other people.
Actually, there's no panel. We're just going to introduce each other over and over, and then we'll be finished in the morning. But thank you very much and welcome to this great event. My name is Mark Walsh, and I am the chairman of the Dingman Center for Entrepreneurship here at the University of Maryland. It's part of the Smith Business School, which is just across the campus. For those of you who have not visited Smith, it's a fantastic organization founded 25 years ago by Michael Dingman. We have a lot of programs and training and educational efforts, both at the undergraduate, graduate level here at the university, and also in the region with entrepreneurs in the Mid-Atlantic region as well. But the reason I'm at the podium was just to make clear, is to introduce Bob Jordan and today's panel. A lot of my old bosses are on this panel. I used to work for Ted, as was just said, at AOL, but before that, I worked for Howard Tullman out in Chicago at a company called Information Kinetics. 20 years ago, I met Howard, and Howard gave me my first job as an entrepreneur in a small venture capital-backed company. And I'd like to tell a short story about Howard to set the tone for tonight's or this morning's panel. A comment Howard made to me 20 years ago in a meeting, which has stuck with me ever since, and I've often quoted it, I often think about it, and I think it sums up a lot of the features of entrepreneurship. I was sitting in a meeting with Howard in this company, Information Kinetics. Howard was the chairman. We were investing or using the invested dollars that we had quite carefully. But things were not going well. Specifically, a software program and platform for optical character recognition. We were scanning resumes and offering online job fairs and all that stuff. A specific piece of software was doing very, very badly. And the vendor was being uncooperative, and we were wasting a lot of time and wasting a lot of money. And in this meeting, Howard turned to me as we were describing how we might address this problem, and he said, "Mark, are you gonna fix this in a lifetime that I give a shit about?" And I thought that one sentence summarized the three things that entrepreneurs tend to show. One, a healthy sense of egotism, a lifetime that I give a shit about, i.e. meaning Howard Tullman. Number two, a sense of direct advice. Are you going to do this in a lifetime that I give a shit about? And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, something that I think you'll see all the entrepreneurs here share, and that is a sense of urgency. Urgency. To me, the essence of successful entrepreneurs are men and women who have a sense of urgency, that there is no better time than now to make your idea into a reality or to grow your idea. And I think that you will see, as these four folks speak to you this morning with Bob Jordan moderating, that they all have a sense of urgency in what they've done in their career. So with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce the moderator of today's panel, Bob Jordan, and thank you again for being here this morning.
Mark, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone on the panel. And before I dive into questions, a couple thank yous to people who are here. And this is not enough, but I have to at least single some people out. Our thanks to Josh Smith for being here, to Mark Walsh, of course, to John Collard. Raise your hand here, John, who this event was not possible without your help. And in particular to Jody Kamens from CBiz. Jody, you got to stand up and take a bow, please.
Yeah.
Thank you. Also thanks to CBN. And there are two things I want to encourage everybody to do in your program. There was a little note and a barcode for something called BOSI, which is your entrepreneurial DNA. It's just 10 questions. We want to know your entrepreneurial DNA. The other thing is you got a little insert in there from a guy named Jim Camp. Entrepreneurs need to be better negotiators, and we're encouraging you to fill out the form, and you can return it to the book site. So I'm going to dive in here. I would have started by picking on Howard Tullman, but there's a home court advantage that first has to go to Ted Leonsis. And I thank you all for being on the panel. Ted, we're going to start with you. I want to know how you got your inspiration to start your first company, Redgate.
Don't you think Mark should be on the panel? Mark's an entrepreneur, and He's very charming. You should
Mark, get up on the panel.
Yeah, I think so. Come on, Mark.
Drag your chair up. We're entrepreneurs, and we can roll with the punches. Drag a chair up, Genius Rocket.
Right.
We like this.
Mark started a lot of companies and lots of fun.
Don't bring your chair though, Mark.
Just make him crouch.
Just sit nearby.
I was reminded this morning, as I got into my car in my very first business. I was a student at Georgetown University. It was 1976, the bicentennial. And I read an article in the Washington Post that said 30 million tourists were coming into Washington, D.C. to celebrate the bicentennial. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a target-rich environment. I got to figure out something to sell to them. And I came up with the idea of starting a snow cone vending business. It's called Snowco Loco Inc. Be a patriot, eat a snow cone. We sold red, white, and blue snow cones. I got venture capitalized by a very wealthy roommate, Lawrence Armour. His family was in that business, the vending business. And I bought an Eccles snow cone machine. And still to this day, snow cones are the best margin business I've ever been in. We sold snow cones in 1976 for $1. It cost less than 2 cents to manufacture the snow cone. And I still have that Eccles snow cone machine in my garage. My daughter now is a sophomore at Georgetown. And she said, Daddy, can you find that snow cone machine? Because as it gets warmer on campus, I want to carry on the entrepreneurial tradition of the family. So she'll get back into the snow cone vending business.
You'll get back into high margin businesses. We're going to move to Howard. Howard, aside from your experience as a professional magician at the age of 8, what was your first startup as an adult?
Well, first I have to say a couple of things. One, I want to suggest to everybody that managing expectations is unbelievably important. So Ted thought the panel was 3 hours, and the sheer relief when he heard there was only an hour was fabulous. So Bob has done a really good job of managing expectations. As to Walsh, I just thank him for setting the profanity umbrella, because certainly you'll hear some awful things from me in the course of this discussion. But I feel like Mark has provided air cover for that. I don't even know. I guess my first business was in the record business, and it was a music store. And what had happened is, it's a really long story, but to make a long story short, throughout all these businesses, if there's one thing that has sort of stayed with me, is that it's really important to have a simple story, whatever the business is. And so it's sort of like, who are we as an organization? Where are we going, and why? And I think a lot of people, a lot of companies just lose sight of how critical it is to have that focus, because it drives and directs everything else that you're doing. And so in that business, the real goal was, I was trying to figure out what the least expensive way to buy albums was. And it turned out to buy them wholesale. I don't know that we ever sold much, to the retail market, but it was a great way of building my music collection. And that's what I remember.
Very inspiring. Actually, I think you and I met after your first IPO, Certified Collateral Corporation. Just so the record is straight, he does actually have serious entrepreneur credentials.
Yeah, so that was a business where we built a national database to tell insurance companies what to pay you if your car was lost or stolen, and you had my sympathy. Because we still do it 30 years later, and it was the first of a series of businesses that figured out that instead of sort of historical information, you could create real-time information that was infinitely more valuable.
Ara, I'm fascinated by the start of Omnilert, which actually was not alert notification. You had this idea for real estate agents to be able to ping their customers with a text message. How in the world did that turn into Omnilert, which is now the leading notification service in college campuses?
Well, as we all know, in the DC area, back in the early 2000s, the real estate market was beyond hot. By the time you received an MLS listing, the house was already sold. And after about a couple dozen experiences like that, the idea dawned, why not use cell phone text messaging to notify home buyers of new listings the second they go on the market. So you can sit down as a home seller with your real estate agent, and while at the table you can post that notification, and potential home buyers will contact you, schedule a listing right away, and sell your home faster and find a home, at least have a fair chance at finding a home. Well, we pinged the idea by a number of different realtors. The first realtor was the realtor selling us our home at the time, and he loved the idea. He thought, this is just great, I love it. You sign the contract, please. We pinged it off a couple other realtors, and they just didn't get it. It was just a lukewarm response. And we kept on trying and searching the market. And then one afternoon, I happened to read an article about a female student at Lehigh University. This was in 1987. Who was brutally raped and murdered in her dorm room in college. There was a serial criminal on campus, and the students they weren't aware of this. And her door was open, and this gentleman came in. And at that moment, I called my partner and said, listen, forget this real estate. We could solve a real problem here. There's a major problem with communicating emergency information on college campuses. We need to focus on this. I immediately called the family of that woman. They formed a security on campus, an organization advocating campus safety. They loved the idea, and we proceeded from there. In 2004, we signed up our first campus, and from there we've just expanded to almost 850 universities in the country.
Thanks, Ara. Troy, the transaction selling SurePayroll for $115 million just closed. I'm curious at the front end of that process, how did you think that idea up?
So SurePayroll, actually the original idea had nothing to do with payroll. We had the idea, the internet, this was 1999, the internet was starting to come into its own, and the original idea was actually to help small businesses with something that they have problems with, which is HR. And small businesses have trouble with compliance, and how do I keep up with all the regulations and keep track of what I need to do for whom. And so the thought was that we could leverage the internet to provide lots of information, one direction, right? Lots of information out to hundreds of thousands of small businesses, not maybe millions. And they'd be willing to pay $1 an employee a month to keep in compliance. And so we went down this path and ended up going to a couple of HR conferences. And there was no software like this, and every entrepreneur we talked to said, $1 an employee a month to keep in compliance. Awesome, so sign me up. And we were literally about to start executing, and as part of the due diligence, we started realizing that we needed to also interface with payroll systems. And so we had to learn a little bit about how that works. So you look at the public filings of companies like ADP and Paychex, and for those of you who've ever invested in ADP or Paychex or looked at those public filings, you'll know why we immediately dropped the HR idea and went directly into payroll, because it's a very high margin business, and those guys were just literally printing money. So we decided that there was a disruptive opportunity because they were doing things in the physical world with delivering physical checks. For those of you who've used a payroll service, you probably know that guy drives up in a rusty old little car and double parks with the flashers on and the bent fender and runs up. You have to sign the sheet, and you have to distribute your physical checks to your employees. Even if they're direct deposit, they get those stubs. And it was just expensive, time-consuming. ADP had over 10 million square feet of office space in this country. Paychex had 114 regional processing centers. And we realized we could do it through the internet, 100% electronically from one location. So we started SurePayroll in late '99.
Thanks, Troy. The two big reasons we wanted to host this panel, the first is that we all know the normal, ordinary course of business. You get normal results, and yet you see some people in some companies where extraordinary things occur. And this is something that is an ongoing fascination for me, and so that is the next question for all of you, which is how you achieve success that is just completely out of the norm. And then we're going to get into challenges. I'm going to start with Mark, because you take something like VerticalNet, your company from way back. How did you take something which was just that little thing and get to an IPO?
Well, you've heard some thematics, I think, in the talks before. The VerticalNet was, at root, an online version of trade publications. And what I concluded when I joined VerticalNet, I'd been doing some B2B work when I was at AOL working with Ted, is that the business-to-business environment, and particularly the trade publishing world, was one of the last castles, sort of the protected bastions in the media empire that had not been attacked by the internet yet. This is back in '97. The trade publications were still physical products put out by the Reed Elsevier's of the world. The trade shows and the directories that they operated were very high margin, but they were physical goods. So the original idea of VerticalNet was to take individual trade magazines, and the best example was a website we operated called solidwaste.com. Solidwaste.com. Some would argue that's the actual name of the internet back then, but solidwaste.com. If you were in the wastewater and waste treatment business, that was your place to go for everything you needed, both the kinds of articles and information that a trade magazine would have, virtual trade shows like you might attend at the Javits Center or in Chicago, virtual auctions of used wastewater treatment equipment. It was sort of a Yahoo and Amazon and kind of an AOL corollary for each of these vertical industries. And we ran 62 of them at our peak. And to your point on how it went from 7 employees and 20 grand in revenue to a IPO, and then we at the peak we're worth $13 billion on the NASDAQ. So it was a very quick acceleration during the bubble. If you remember those years, I think of them fondly. But the idea, to Howard's point, was a simple idea that every time we talked to somebody, we said, the trade magazine you get every month in your industry, imagine that live, interactive on the web when you need it. And that simple idea, and that attacking a part of the media empire that had not been really attacked by the internet and what the internet could do for people, was a natural opportunity for us.
Ted, how about you? You had Redgate, you sold it to AOL. There was not necessarily a guarantee early on that AOL was going to be such a home run, such a big winner. You had all these things that had already occurred, Prodigy, CompuServe, Genie, Delphi. How was it that AOL achieved such outsized success?
Well, I'll take a step back because I started my first company in 1981. It was called LIST. The Leonsis Index to Software Technology. And I got the idea by grocery shopping. I was a bachelor, I was standing in line at a grocery store, and so I was checking out, there was a TV guide right at checkout. And I remember there was this starburst that said, the #1 best-selling magazine in America. I was shocked, because I'd never seen a TV guide. We didn't have one in my house. And I bought it, and the front of the book was interviews with television directors, television stars, and the back of the book was a directory. What programs ran on what networks? And I remember thinking, I can't believe this is the #1 best-selling magazine in America, threw it out, and then went to my little home office a couple hours later and sat in front of my Apple II computer. I had 2 programs on the side. VisiCalc and PFS database software. And I just come back from a West Coast computer fair and heard Dr. Metcalf talking about the Ethernet network. And honestly had this whack on the side of the head as I looked at this personal computer that looked like a television. And TV Guide talked about networks, and Dr. Metcalf talked about networks. And I had 2 programs, and I just said, I bet you one day all of this is going to come together. And I quit my job, and I started a company. I raised $1 million in venture capital from a couple of friends and a big investment company, and started a TV guide for the nascent software business. IBM had just started to announce that it was going to ship and get into the PC business, and created a company, and I hit it. I was early in, and this company grew really, really fast, and a couple years later I sold it for $66 million to a big British firm. And so I kind of declared victory. I was very young, I was 26 years old, made all this money, and a couple years later started a second company called Redgate, which was, if there is going to be convergence and you won't be able to distinguish between televisions and telephones and computers. There would be a new kind of media, new rules, new media, and that's what Redgate Communications was, and that's what AOL ended up buying back in 1993. And our company's role was really to take the internet, which was this scary modem-based software, ugly business, and do what a professor at Georgetown told me about a thesis, which was bring together technology and liberal arts. It's truly amazing that a couple years ago, Steve Jobs gave this speech and was asked, why was Apple so valuable? Why did they get it? And he said, Apple is where liberal arts and technology come together. Well, that's what we tried to do at AOL. Make something very, very complicated, populist. Make something ugly, technology, servers, software, and make it approachable and easy to use and populous and get America online. And that was our charter. When I joined the company, it was about 500 people combined. Steve Case bought our company. We had 150 people. AOL had 350 people. We merged. The company obviously was going public. And 10 years later, the company went from a market cap of $400 million to $160 billion, about what Google is valued at today. And you know, for the first generation internet, we were the first internet company to go public. We got America Online, we built a big, big audience and built a lot of value.
Thanks, Ted. Ara, how did you take Omnilert to the point that it is today? I mean, is this one of your lemonade stand rules? You don't start anything that you don't have a customer to pay you for?
Exactly. We have, I mentioned the lemonade stand. It's a book my partner and I wrote about bootstrapping for the 21st century, really to inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs, whether you're 8 years old or 80 years old. But one of the key principles that we've always adhered to, a few of them, but number one, fund the business through sales. So if you do not have someone that's willing to pay for your product, then you don't have a business case for it. And secondly, what makes that even easier is the principle, do not compete. We believe that it's best to rather than stay focused on your competitors, stay focused on what you're doing and trailblaze. Find an area that's not yet, find a pain that's not yet being remedied and go into that. So we've expanded our Omnilert brand. We started with E2 Campus, which was the higher education emergency alerting system, to a service called AmeriAlert, which is used by municipalities for communications. But one of our fastest growing brands is a service called Rained Out. And interesting with that, years ago, I was coaching my son's, I think, 6-year-old youth soccer league. And it was one of those questionable days outside, and we had, I was out there as a coach, and parents were coming up to me and asking, come on, you know, is the game canceled or what? You know, that we came all the way out here, and they eventually canceled the game. So I offered our alerting service to the league, and they set the service up in, I think, 2005. And organically, we did not spend a dime of marketing or sales efforts. It just spread through word of mouth. We accumulated over 5,000 leagues and organizations because there was nothing out there that was doing that. There was a clear pain, there was a clear problem that was yet to be solved. The solution at that point was the phone tree, where you call one person, then you call 2 people, and then they call other folks. And so this was a real clear solution. We did not compete. We owned that marketplace, and we still do today. But there was also the ability to fund that new business unit through sales as well.
Howard, I'm going to pick on you just for one of your companies, Tribeca Flashpoint. That it amazes me how fast, you know, I would think an institution of higher education that, you know, you're 5-10 years you have to be in it. And it amazes me how fast you got Flashpoint up and running with students. And can you talk about that process?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think that it's a rule that we use in every business. The thing that entrepreneurs have that's the scarcest resource is time. And you know, opportunity cost is a concept that it's really important to keep in mind whatever you're doing. When we were building this grew out of an idea and a sort of a discipline that we call fucked or famous, if you'll excuse my French. And what it said was really simple. It said, in 6 months, we'll fund anything for that period of time if there are concrete metrics. And then at the end of 6 months, we'll make a decision. Either the dog is eating the dog food and the business should go forward, or we'll have the real discipline to get out of the business. So in this case, to start a school from scratch, 100 days later to have a fully built school, fully organized staff and faculty, the first 100 students, we now have about 600 students, was a forced march. And the two things that I can tell you that grew out of that mostly were, one, this idea that you have to do everything quickly, and two, that if you're a really passionate entrepreneur, you learn that you don't have to ever evaluate either or propositions, because every single day of those 100 days, somebody came in and said, we could do it right or we could do it quick. We could do it smooth or we could do it inexpensively. And so our position was, no, you don't understand. This is not some other client, feel free to go do a mediocre job for them. This is really a sacred crusade. We're dealing with people's future and the education of tens of thousands of kids. And there's only one right way to do this, and we expect you to do that and shortchange somebody else. And that becomes contagious. And an entrepreneur is a salesperson more than anything else. And so this thing was driven by that vision, and it was really critical. But the other thing is, this is the first step in a set of changes. And you've heard some historical information. For my 2 cents, you guys are running, and you men and ladies are running businesses. We're at the cusp of a whole new set of changes. The internet is going to change the world again, mostly as a product of the fact that we have tools today that we never had. Mark talked about niche publications. I remember, parking my car and seeing a magazine called Stripes, and it was literally a magazine for parking lot attendants. I mean, so the world of niche opportunities is available to us now because we have so much personal information about people in every walk of life that they've shared with us that we can target way more than we ever could. People think the internet is about immediacy and speed. It's not. It's about accountability and precision now in what we can do. And lastly, everybody is constantly connected. And so this is going to roil and change every kind of business. It's going to change how marketing is done. It's going to change every business. Our students are, it's amazing, they come in thinking they're going to work in some of these disciplines, and they go out as digital professionals working in every major Fortune 100 company in America, because every company is engaged in this migration from analog to digital, and it's just beginning. It's going to create tens of millions of new businesses.